up, little bro? How's it going? It's your boy me, Land. I don't recommend any of you watch this because I sound like shit. I feel like shit, man. But we're gonna do it anyways because I don't care. I don't give a shit, man. Wait, this is this entire thing? Damn, that's short. Okay. Alice was number one. Alice in Wonderland down the rabbit at the bank and having nothing to do. Once or twice she had peeped into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it, and what use is a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversations? So she was considering her own mind as well as she could, for the day made her feel very sleepy and stupid. Whether the pleasure of making a daisy chain would be worth the trouble of getting up and picking the daisies, when suddenly a white rabbit with pink eyes ran close by her. There was nothing so very remarkable in that, nor did Alice think that it so very much out of the way to hear the rabbit say to itself, oh dear, I shall be late. I shall be too late. But when the rabbit actually took the watch out of the waistcoat pocket and looked at it and hurried on, Alice stared at her feet, for it flashed across her mind that she had never before seen a rabbit with either a waistcoat pocket or a watch to take out of it, and burning with curiosity, she ran across the field after it, and was just in time to see it pop down a large rabbit hole under the hedge. In another moment, down went Alice after it. The rabbit hole went straight on like a tunnel for some way, and then dipped suddenly down so suddenly that Alice had not a moment to think about stopping herself before she found herself falling down what seemed to be a very deep well. Either the well was very deep or she fell very slowly, for she had plenty of time, and as she went down to look around her. First she thought she tried to make out what she was coming to, but it was too dark to see anything, and then she looked at the sides of the well and noticed that they were filled with cupboards and bookshelves. Here and there she saw maps and pictures hung upon pegs. She took down a jar from one of the shelves as it passed. It was labeled orange marmalade, but to her great disappointment it was empty. She did not like to drop the jar, so she managed to put it onto one of the cupboards as she fell past it. Down, down, down would the fall never come to an end. There was nothing else to do, so Alice began talking to herself. Diddle me, miss me very much tonight, I should think. Dinah was the cat. I hope they'll remember her saucer of milk at tea time. Dinah, my dear, I wish you were down here with me. Alice felt like she was dozing off when suddenly thump, 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 down came a heap of sticks and dry leaves, and the fall was over. Alice was not the least bit hurt. As she jumped up in a moment, she looked up. All was dark overhead, and before her was a long passage, and the white rabbit still in sight, hurrying down. There was not a moment to be lost. Away went Alice like the wind, and she was just in time to hear it say, as it turned the corner, "Oh, my ears and whiskers, how late it's getting." She was close behind it when she turned the corner, but the rabbit was no longer to be seen. She found herself in a long, long, low hall, which was lit up by a row of lamps hanging from the roof. There were doors all round the hall, but they were all locked, and when Alice had been all the way down one side and up the other, trying every door, she walked sadly down the middle, wondering how she was ever to get out again. Suddenly she came upon a little table, all made of solid glass. There was nothing on it but a tiny golden key, and Alice's first idea was that this might belong to one of the doors of the hall. But alas, either the locks were too large or the key was too small, but at any rate she would not open any of them. However, on the second time round she came across a low curtain she had not noticed before, and behind it was a little door about 15 inches high. She tried the little golden key in the lock, and to her great delight it fitted. Alice opened the door and found that it led her down a small passage not larger than a rat hole. She knelt down and looked along the passage into the loveliest garden you've ever seen. How she longed to get out of that dark hall and wander about among those beds of bright flowers and those cool fountains, but she could not even get her head through the doorway. "Oh," said Alice, "how I wish I could shut up like a telescope. I think if I could, if I only knew how to begin." Alice went round the back of the table, half hoping she might find another key on it, or at any rate a book of rules for shutting people up like telescopes. This time she found a little bottle on it, which certainly was not there before, said Alice, and tied round the neck of the bottle was a paper labelled with the words "Drink me" beautifully printed on it in large letters. "Now I'll look first and see whether this is marked poison or not," for she had never forgotten that if you drink a bottle marked poison, it is most certainly tied round the neck of a bottle with a paper label with the words "Drink me." Fuck, I'm reading it again. Taste and finding it very nice. It had sort of a mixed flavor cherry tart, custard, pineapple roast turkey, toffee, and hot buttered toffee. She would very soon finish it off. What a curious feeling, said Alice. I must be shutting up like a telescope, and so it was indeed. She was now only 10 inches high. Her face brightened up at the thought that she was now the right size for going through the little door into that lovely garden. After a while, finding that nothing more happened, she decided on going into the garden at once, but alas for poor Alice. When she got to the door, she found that she had forgotten the little golden key, and when she went back to the table for it, she found she could not possibly reach it. She could see it quite well. There's no use in this minute. She generally, and sometimes she scolded herself so severely. The last box that was lying under the eat me were beautifully marked in currants. I'll eat it, said Alice, and if it makes me grow larger, I can reach the key, and if it makes me grow smaller, I can creep up a little bit, and said anxiously to herself, which way, tries to find that she remained the same. That's the end of chapter 1 of Alice in Wonderland. Chapter 2 of the Pool of Tears. Curiouser and curiouser, said Alice. She was so very much surprised that for the moment she quite forgot how to speak good English. Now I'm opening out feet. Oh, my poor little feet. I wonder who will put on your shoes and stockings for now, dears. I shall be a great deal too far to trouble myself about you. Just at this moment her head struck through the roof of the hall. In fact, she was rather now more than 9 feet high, and she looked at the little golden tea and hurried off to the garden door. Shoot a luda. Just at this moment her head struck against the roof of the hall. In fact, she was rather now more than 9 feet high. Oh my god, I already said that. Poor Alice, it was as much as she could do lying down. It was much more hopeless than ever. She sat down around her and reaching, pattering a feet in the distance, and hastily dried her eyes to see what was coming. She'd be savage. Loaded away as hard as he could go. Alice took the fans and gloves and queer as everything today. And yesterday everything went. As she said that, she looked down the hall at her hands and was surprised to see that she went to the table to measure it and was going. The cause of this was the fan she was holding, and dropped it hastily just in time to save herself from shaking away altogether. That was a narrow to find herself still in existence. And now for the garden. She ran with all speed back to the little door, but alas, the little door was shut again, and the little golden key was lying on the glass table as before. Things are worse than ever, said the poor child, for I was never so small as this before. Slipped, and for a moment splash, she was up to her chin in salt water. However, she was soon made. Just then she heard something splashing about in the pool a little way off, and she swam near to see what it was. She soon made out it was a mouse that had slipped in like herself. Would that be of any use now, thought Alice, to speak to this little mouse? Everything is so out of the way down here that I should think very likely it can talk, and at any rate there's no harm trying. So she began, "Oh, Mouse, do you know of any way out of this pool? I'm very tired of swimming around here, oh, Mouse." The mouse looked at her rather inquisitively, and seemed to her to wink with one of its little eyes, but it said nothing. Perhaps it doesn't understand English, so thought Alice. I dare say it's a French mouse come over with William the Conqueror. So she began again, "Oi est ma chatte," which was the first sentence in her French lesson book. The mouse gave a sudden leap out of the water and seemed to quiver over with fright. "Oh, I beg your pardon," cried Alice hastily, for that she had hurt the poor animal's feelings. I quite forgot you don't like cats." "Not like cats?" cried the mouse in a shrill, passionate voice. "Would you like cats if you were me?" "Well, perhaps not," said Alice in a soothing tone. "Don't be angry about it, and yet I wish I could show you our cat Dinah. I hope you take a fancy to cats. If only you could see her, she is quite She's a dear, quiet thing. The mouse was bristling all over, and she felt certain it must feel really offended. We won't talk about her anymore if you'd rather not. We indeed, cried the mouse, who was trembling down to the end of his tail, as if I would talk of bones, and its don't tea party. Hurried to change the subject of the conversation. Are you fond of dogs? There was such a nice little dog near our house. I'd like to show you. It kills all the rats. And oh dear, cried Alice in a sorrowful tone. I'm afraid I've offended it again. For the mouse was swimming away as from the pool as it went. So she cried softly, dogs either if you don't like them. Get to the shore, and then I'll tell you my. It was high time to go, for the pool was getting quite crowded. And a lorry and an eaglet and several other curious creatures. Chapter 3. Indeed, a queer-looking party that assembled on the bank. The birds with the how to get dry again. There was some seemed quite. And with the mouse in the middle. Ahem, said the mouse with an important conqueror who is caused by the English who wanted to restoration and conquest. Edwin and Marcar, the lorry with a shiver, and he yeah, advisable. Found it what course you know what that means. What it means. It's generally a frog or a worm. The question is advisable to go with Edgar. It continued, turning to Alice as it spoke as what at all. And that for English said the eaglet. I don't know the meaning of half those long words, and what's more, I don't believe you do either. What was I going to say? What I was going to say to the dodo in a most offended tone is that the best thing to get us dry. Why? The best thing to explain it marked off there. There was no one, so it was not easy to know when the race was over. However, when they had been the race is over, and they called credit around it, panting and asking, but who has won? This question the dodo could not answer without a great deal of thought. At last it said, everybody has won. Chorus of dodo pointing, falling out in a confused way, handed to her pocket and pulled out a box of comfits. They were exactly one apiece all around. The small ones choked and had to be patted on their backs. Tell me your history, you know, said Alice, and why you why it is you hate C&D. She added with a whisper, half afraid. Alice looking down with wonder at the mouse's tail. Speaking. The mouse that he met in the house. Let us come at all, have no denial. We must have a trial, for it really is such a trial, dear sir, with no jury nor judge, would be wasting our breath till judge, I'll be jury, said the cunning old fury. I bend, I think. You insult me by talking such nonsense, said the mouse, getting up and walking away. Please come back and finish your story, Alice called after it, and the others joined in the chorus. Yes, please do. But the mouse only shook its head impatiently and walked a little quicker. I wish I had Dinah or Cat here, said Alice. This caused a remarkable sensation amongst the party. Some of the birds hurried off at once, and a canary called out in a trembling voice to its children, Come away, my dears. It is high time you were all in bed. On various pretexts they all moved off, and Alice was soon left alone. I wish I hadn't mentioned Dinah. No one seems to like her down here, and I'm sure she's the best cat in the world. Poor Alice began to cry again. She felt very lonely and low spirited. In a little while, however, she again heard a little pattering of footsteps in the distance, and she looked up eagerly. That's the end of chapter 3 of Alice in Wonderland. Let's check on the recording. It's looking good. Beautiful. Chapter 4. Rabbit sends in a little bill. There's a white rabbit trotting slowly back again and looking anxiously as it went, as if it has lost something else. Her muttering to herself, the Duchess, oh my dear paws on my fur and whiskers, she'll get me executed as sure as ferrets are ferrets. Where can I have dropped them, I wonder? Alice guessed the moment she was looking for was a fan of a pair of white kid gloves. She was very good naturedly began hunting about for them, but they were nowhere to be seen. Everything seemed to have changed since her swim in the pool. In the great hall with the glass cable and the little door had vanished completely. Very soon the rabbit noticed Alice and called to her in an angry tone. While I am Mary Ann, are you doing here? Run home this moment and fetch me a pair of gloves and a fan, quick now. He took me for his housemaid, said Alice, and she ran up. As she ran up, how surprised he'll be when he finds out who I am. Why, she said that she came upon a neat little house, on the doors of which had a bright glass plate. And without knocking, hurry upstairs in great fear lest she meet the real Mary Ann and be turned out of the house before she had found the can and gloves. But by this time Alice had found her way into the tiny little room with the table at the window, and on it a fan or two or three pairs of tiny white kid gloves. And she took up the fan and pair of white kid gloves, and she was just going to leave the room when her eyes fell upon a little bottle that stood next to the licking glass. She uncorked it and put it to her lips, saying to herself, I do hope this will make me grow large again, for really I'm quite tired of being such a tiny little thing. Before she had drunk half the bottle, she had found her head pressing against the ceiling, and she had stooped to save her neck from being broken. She hastily put down the bottle, remarking, That's fine enough. I hope I shan't grow any more. Alas, but it was too late to wish this. She went on growing and growing, and very soon she had to kneel down on the floor. Still, she went on growing, and as the very last resource, she put one arm out the window and one foot up the chimney. She said to herself, Now I can do no more. Whatever happens, what will become of me? Lucky for Alice, the little magic bottle had now its full effect, and she grew no longer. After a few minutes, she heard a voice outside and stopped to listen. Mary Ann, said the voice, fetch me my gloves at this very moment. And there then came a little pattering of feet on the stairs. How soon was the rabbit coming to look for her? And she trembled until she shook the house that was in the window. That you won't, thought Alice, and after waiting until she fancied she heard the rabbit just under the window, and suddenly she spread out her hand and made a snatch in the air. She did not get hold of anything, but she heard a little shriek and a fall and a crash of broken glass, from which she concluded that it was just possible it had fallen into a cucumber frame of some sort. Next came an angry voice of the rabbit's, Pat, Pat, where are you? And then a voice she'd never heard before. Sure, I'm here, digging for apples, your honor. Here, come help me out of this. Now tell me, Pat, what's that in the window? Sure, it's an arm, your honor. Well, it's got no business there. At any rate, go take it away. There was a long silence after this, and Alice could only hear whispers now and then. And at last she threw out her hand, and nails and statue of the air. Then there's two screeches and sounds of broken glass. I wonder what they'll do next, said Alice. As for pulling me out of the window, I only wish they could. She waited for some time without hearing any more. At last she came a rumbling of little cart's wheels and the sound of a good many voices all talking together. She made out the words, "What's the other Bill? Got the other here, Bill? Here, Bill. Will on the roof. Shoot, Bear. Who's to go down the chimney now? I shan't. You do it. Here, Bill. The master says you gotta go down the chimney." Alice drew her foot as far down the chimney as she could, and waited till she heard a little animal scratching and scrambling about in the chimney close to her. Then she gave it one sharp kick and waited to see what would happen next. The first thing she heard was a general chorus of "There goes Bill!" And then the rabbit's voice said, "Catch him, you by the head." Then silence and another confusion of voices. Hold up his head, Brandy. Now don't choke him. What happened to you? Last came a little feeble squeaking noise. I hardly know. No more ye think ye, thank ye. I'm better now. All I know is something comes at me like a jack in the box. Now up I go like a skyrocket. After a minute or two of silence, they became movement again, and Alice heard the rabbit say, "A barrelful will do to begin with." Barrelful of what? Thought Alice, but she had not long to doubt, for the next moment a shower of little petals came rattling in at the window, and some of them hit her in the face. Alice noticed to some surprise the pebbles were all turning into little cakes as they lay on the floor, and a bright idea came to her head. If I eat one of these cakes, she thought, it's sure to make some change in my size. So she swallowed one of the cakes and was delighted to find that she began shrinking directly. As she was small enough to get through the door, she ran out of the house and found a crowd of little animals and birds waiting outside. They all made a rush at Alice the moment she appeared, but she ran off as hard as she could and found herself safe in a thick wood. The first thing I gotta do, said Alice to herself, as she wandered about in the wood, is to grow to my right size again. The second thing is to find my way to the lovely garden. I suppose I ought to eat or drink something or other. The great question is what? Alice looked around her at the flowers and the blades of grass, but she could not see anything that looked the right size to eat or drink under the circumstances. There was a large mushroom growing near her, about the same size as herself. She stretched herself up on tiptoe and peeped over the edge, and her eyes immediately met those of a large blue caterpillar that was sitting on top with its arms folded, quietly smoking a long hookah, and taking not the smallest notice of her or anything else. That is the end of Chapter 4 of Alice in Wonderland. Chapter 5 of Alice in Wonderland, Advice from a Caterpillar. At last the caterpillar took the hook out of his mouth and addressed Alice in a languid, sleepy voice. Who are you? Said the caterpillar. Alice replied rather shyly, I hardly know, sir. Just at the present, at least I know who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I might have changed several times since then. What do you mean by that? Said the caterpillar sternly. Explain yourself. I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir, said Alice, because I'm not myself. You see, being so many sizes in a day is very confusing. She drew herself up and said very gravely, I think you ought to tell me who you are first. Why, said the caterpillar, as Alice could not think of any good reason, and the caterpillar seemed to be very unpleasant state of mind, she turned away. Come back, the caterpillar called after her. I have something important to say. Alice turned and came back again. Keep your temper, said the caterpillar. Is that all? Said Alice, swallowing down her anger as well as she could. No, said the caterpillar. Then unfolded its arms, and took out the hookah out of its mouth again, and said, So you think you've changed, do you? I'm afraid I am, sir, said Alice. I can't remember things as I used, and I don't keep the same size for 10 minutes together. What size do you want to be? Asked the caterpillar. Oh, I'm not particular as to size, Alice hastily replied. Only one doesn't like changing so often, you know. I should like to be a little larger, sir, if you wouldn't mind. Said Alice. 3 inches is such a wretched height to be. It's a very good height indeed, said the caterpillar, angrily, rearing itself upright as it spoke. It was exactly 3 inches high. In a minute or two, the caterpillar got down off its mushroom and crawled away into the grass, merely remarking as it went. One side will make you grow taller, the other side will make you grow shorter. One side of what? The other side of what? Thought Alice to herself. With the mushroom, said the caterpillar, just as if she had asked it out loud. In another moment, it was out of sight. Alice remained looking thoughtfully at the mushroom for a minute, trying to make out which were the two sides of it. At last she stretched her arms round it as far as they would go, and it broke off a bit at the edge with each hand. And now which is which, she said to herself, and nibbled a little bit of the right hand bit to try its effect. Next moment she felt a violent billow underneath her chin, and it struck her foot. She was now a great deal frightened by this very sudden change, as she was shrinking rapidly, so she set to work at once to eat some of the other bit. Her chin was pressed so closely against her foot there was hardly enough room to open her mouth, but she did it at last. She was man and managed to swallow a morsel of the last hand bit. Come, my head's free at last, said Alice, but all she could see when she looked down was an immense length of neck, which seemed to rise like a stalk out of a sea of green leaves far below her. And where have my shoulders got to? Oh, my poor hands, how it is I can't see. She was delighted to find her neck would bend about easily in any direction like a serpent. She had succeeded in curving it down to a graceful zigzag, and was going to dive in amongst the leaves, when a sharp hiss made her draw back in a hurry. A large pigeon had flown into her face, and was beating her violently with his wings. Serpent, cried the pigeon. I am not a serpent, cried Alice indignantly. Leave me alone. I've tried the roots of trees, I've tried banks, I've tried hedges, the pigeon went on, but these serpents, there's no pleasing them. Alice was more and more puzzled. As if I wasn't trouble enough hatching the eggs, said the pigeon, but I must be on the lookout for serpents night and day. Just as I've taken the highest tree in the wood, continued the pigeon, raising his voice to shriek, just as I was thinking I should be free of them at last, they must needs come wriggling down from the sky. A serpent! I'm not a serpent, I tell you. I'm a little girl, she added rather doubtfully, and she remembered the number of changes she had gone through the day. You're looking for eggs, I know that well enough, said the pigeon, But what does it matter to me whether you're a little girl or a serpent? It matters a good deal to me, said Alice hastily, but I'm not looking for eggs as it happened. If I was, I shouldn't want yours. I don't like 'em raw. Well, be off then, said the pigeon in a sulky voice, and has settled down into his nest. Alex scratched down among the trees as well as she could, for her neck kept getting entangled among the branches, and every now and then she'd just stop it and twist it. After a while, she remembered that she still held the pieces of mushroom in her hand, and she set to work very carefully, nibbling first at one and the other, and growing sometimes taller and sometimes shorter until she succeeded in bringing herself down to their usual height. It was so long since she had bit anything near her the right size that it felt quite strange at first. The next thing is to get into that beautiful garden. How is that to be done, I wonder? As she said this, she came suddenly upon an open place with a little house in it, about 4 feet high. Whoever lives here, thought Alice, it will never do to come up to them in this size. Why, I should frighten them out of their wits. She did not venture to go near the house till she had brought herself down to 9 inches high. And that is the end of chapter 5 of Alice in Wonderland. Chapter 6 in Alice in Wonderland, Pig and Pepper. For a minute or two she stood looking at the house, when suddenly a footman in livery came running out of the wood. Judging by his face only, she would have called him a fish, and rapped loudly at the door with his knuckles. It was opened by another footman in livery, with a round face and large eyes like a frog. The fish footman began producing from under his arms a great letter, and he handed it to the other, saying in a solemn tone, "For the Duchess, an invitation for the Queen to play croquet." The frog footman repeated in the same tone, "From the Queen and Duchess, an invitation for the Duchess to play croquet." They both bowed low and got their curls entangled together. When Alice peeped out, the fish footmen were gone, and the other was sitting on the ground near the door, staring stupidly up into the sky. Alice went up to the door and knocked, timidly up to the door and knocked. "There's no sort of use in knocking," said the footman, "and that's for 2 reasons. First, because I'm on the same side of the door as you are, and secondly, because they're making such a noise inside no one could possibly hear you." And certainly that was most extraordinary noise going on within, a constant howling and sneezing, and every now and then there was a great crash, as if a dish or kettle was being broken into pieces. "How am I to get in?" said Alice. "Are you to get in at all?" said the footman. "That is the first question, you know." Alice opened the door and went in. The door led to the large kitchen, which was full of smoke from one end to the other, and the Duchess was sitting on a three-legged stool in the middle, nursing a baby, and the cook was leaning over the fire, stirring a large cauldron, which seemed to be full of soup. "There is certainly not too much pepper in this soup," Alice said to herself, as well as she could from sneezing. Even the Duchess sneezed occasionally, and as for the baby, it was sneezing and howling alternately. Without a moment's pause, there was 2 creatures in their kitchen that did not sneeze, with a cook and large cat which were grinning for ear. "Please, would you tell me," said Alice a little timidly, "why your cat grins like this?" "It's a Cheshire cat," said the Duchess, "and that's why." "I didn't know that Cheshire cats always grin. In fact, I didn't know cats could grin," said Alice. "You don't know much," said the Duchess, "and that's a fact." Just then the cook took her cauldron of soup off the fire, and said at once, throwing everything within her reach of the Duchess and the baby, "Fire irons came first, followed by a shower of saucepans, plates, and dishes. The Duchess took notice of them even when they hit, and the baby was howling so much already that it was quite impossible to say whether the blows hurt it or not. "Oh, please mind what you're doing," cried Alice, jumping up and down in an agony of terror. "Here, you may nurse it a bit if you like," said Duchess to Alice, and get ready to play croquet with the Queen, and she hurried off to her room. Alice caught the baby with some difficulty. It was a queer-shaped little creature, and held out its arms and legs in all directions. "If I don't take this child away with me," thought Alice, "they're sure going to kill it in a day or two. Would it be murder to leave it behind?" She said the last 2 words out loud, and the little thing grunted in reply. "If you're going to turn into a pig, my dear," said Alice, "I'll have nothing more to do with you. Mind now." Alice was just beginning to think to herself, "Now what am I to do with this creature when I get it home?" When it grunted again so violently that Alice looked down into his face with some alarm. This time there could be no mistake about it. It was neither more nor less than a pig. So she set the little creature down, and felt quite relieved to see it trot away quietly into the wood. Alice was a little startled by seeing the Cheshire cat sitting on a bough of tree a few yards off. The cat only grinned when it saw her. "Cheshire puss," said Alice rather timidly, "would you please tell me which way I ought to go from here?" "In that direction," the cat said, waving its right paw round, "lives a hatter, and in that direction, waving the other paw, lives a March hare. Visit either you like. They're both mad." "But I don't want to go among mad people," Alice remarked. "Oh, you can't help that," said the cat. "We're all mad here. Do you play croquet with the Queen today?" "I should like it very much," said Alice, "but I haven't been invited yet." "You'll see me there," said the cat, and vanished. Alice had not gone much further before she came into the sight of the house of the March Hare. It was so large a house that she did not like to go near it until she had nibbled more of that left hand bit of mushroom. And that is the end of chapter 6 of this book. There was a table set out, mad tea party. There was a table set out under the tree in front of the house, and the Marcher and the Hatter were having tea on it. A dormouse was sitting between them, fast asleep. The table was a large one, but the three were all crowded together in one corner of it. No room, no room, they cried out when they saw Alice coming. There's plenty of room, said Alice indignantly, and she sat down on a large armchair. I wanted one at the end of the table. The Hatter opened his eyes very wide on hearing this, but all he said was, why is a raven like a writing desk? I'm glad to think they've been asking riddles. I believe I can guess that, she added aloud. Do you mean to think you can find out the answer to it? Said the Marcher. Exactly so, said Alice. Then you should say what you mean, the Marcher went on. I do, Alice hastily replied. At least I mean what I say. That's the same thing, you know. You might just as well say, said the Dormouse, which was seemed to be talking in sleep, that I breathe when I sleep. It's the same thing as I sleep when I breathe. It is the same thing to you, said the Hatter, as he poured a little hot tea upon its nose. The Dormouse shook its head impatiently and without opening its eyes. Of course, just what I was going to remark myself. Have you guessed the riddle yet? Said the Hatter, again turning to Alice again. No, I give up, said Alice. What's the answer? I haven't the slightest idea, said the Hatter. Nor I, said the Marcher. Alice gave a weary sigh. I think you might have something better to do with your time, she said, than wasting asking riddles that have no answers. Take more tea, said the Marcher. The Marcher said to Alice very earnestly. I've had nothing yet, Alice replied in a most offended tone, so I can't take more. That you mean you can't take less, said the Hatter. It's very easy to take more than nothing. At this, Alice got up and walked off. The Dormouse fell asleep instantly, and neither of the others took the least notice of her going, though she looked back once or twice, and the last time she saw him, they were trying to put the Dormouse into the teapot. At this rate, I'll never go there again, said Alice, and she picked her way through the wood. It's the stupidest tea party I was ever at in my life. Just as she said that, she noticed one of the trees at the head, a door leading right into it. That's very curious, she thought. I think I might as well go in there at once. And in she went. Once more, she found herself in the long hall close to the little glass table. Taking the little golden key, she unlocked the door that led to the garden. Then she went to work nibbling at the mushroom. She kept a piece of it in her pocket till she was about a foot high, and then she walked down the little passage, and then she found herself at last in the beautiful garden, among the bright flower beds and the cool fountains. That's the end of that chapter. Chapter 8, The Queen's Croquet Ground. That's the end of chapter 7. The large rose tree stood in the entrance of the garden. The roses growing on it were white, but there were 3 gardeners at it busy painting them red. Suddenly their eyes chanced to fall on Alice, and she stood watching them. Would you tell me, please, said Alice timidly, why are you painting those roses? 5 and 7 said nothing, but looked at 2. 2 began in a low voice. Why, the fact is, you see, miss, that there ought to have been a red rose tree. We put a white one in by mistake, and if the Queen was to find that out, we should all have our heads cut off, you know. So you see, miss, we're doing our best before she comes to. At this moment, 5, who had been anxious looking out across the garden, called out, the Queen, the Queen. The 3 gardens instantly threw themselves flat upon their faces. There was the sound of many footsteps, and Alice looked around, eager to see the Queen. First came 10 soldiers carrying warriors. They were ornamented themselves all over with diamonds. Next came the royal children. There were 10 of them, all ornamented with hearts. Next came the guests, mostly kings and queens, and among them Alice recognized the white rabbit. Then followed the knave of hearts and the king's crown on crimson velvet cushion. And at last, of all this procession came the queen of hearts. My name is. When the percussion came opposite to Alice, they all stopped and looked at her, and the Queen said severely, "Who is this?" She said it to the knave of hearts, who only bowed and smiled in reply. "My name is Alice, so please your Majesty," said Alice very politely, but she added herself, "Why, there's only a pack of cards, that's all. Can you play croquet?" shouted the Queen. The question was evidently meant for Alice. "Yes," said Alice loudly. "Come on, then," roared the Queen. It's a very fine day," said the timid voice to Alice. She was walking by the white rabbit, who was peeping anxiously in her face. "Very," said Alice. "Where's the Duchess?" "Hush, hush," said the rabbit. "She's under the sentence of execution. 1 second, let me check. Okay, we're good." "What for?" said Alice. "She boxed the Queen's ears." The rabbit began. "Get to your places," shouted the Queen in a voice of thunder. The people began running about in all directions, tumbling up against each other. However, they all got settled in a minute or 2, and the game began. Alice thought she had never seen such a curious croquet gun in her life. It was all ridges and furrows. The croquet balls were live hedgehogs, and the mallets were live flamingos, and the soldiers had doubled themselves up to stand on their heads and feet to make their arches. The players all played at once without waiting for turns, quarreling all the while and fighting for the hedgehogs. In a very short time the Queen was in a furious passion, went stamping about, shouting, "Off with his head," or "Off with her head," all about once in a minute. They're dreadfully fond of beheading people here, thought Alice. The great wonder it is that anyone's left alive. She's looking for someone to escape when she noticed a curious appearance in the air. It's the Cheshire Cat, she said to herself. Now that I have someone to talk to. How are you getting on, said the cat. I don't think they all play fairly. They play at all fairly, Alice said in a rather complaining tone. They all quarrel so dreadfully one can't hear oneself speak. They don't seem to have any rules in particular. How do you like the Queen, said the cat in a low voice. Not at all, said Alice. Alice thought she might well go back and see how the game was going on. So she went off in search of her hedgehog. The hedgehog was engaged in a fight with another hedgehog, which seemed to Alice an excellent opportunity for croqueting one of them with the other. The only difficulty was that the flamingo was gone across the other side of the garden when Alice could see it trying, in a helpless sort of way, to fly up a tree. She caught the flamingo and tucked it away under her arm so that it might not escape again. Just then Alice ran over to the Duchess, who was now out of prison. She tucked her arm affectionately into Alice's, and they walked off together. Alice was glad to find her in such a pleasant temper. She was a little startled, however, when she heard the voice of the Duchess close to her ear. "You're always thinking about something, my dear, and that makes you forget to talk." "The game's going on rather better now," Alice said, by way of keeping up the conversation a little. "'Tis so," said the Duchess. "And the moral of it that is oh, 'tis love that makes the world go round." Somebody said, Alice whispered, "that it's done by everybody minding his own business." "Ah, well, it means much the same thing," said the Duchess, digging her sharp old chin into Alice's shoulder. She added, "The moral of that is, take care of the sense, the sounds will take care of themselves." To Alice's great surprise, the Duchess's arms were linked into hers began to tremble. Alice looked up, and there stood the Queen in front of her, with her arms folded, frowning like a thunderstorm. "Now I gave you fair warning," shouted the Queen, stamping on the ground as she spoke. "Either you or your head must come off, and that is in about half no time. Take your choice." The Duchess took her choice and was gone in a moment. "Now let's get on with the game," the Queen said to Alice, and Alice was much too frightened to say a word, but slowly followed her back to the croquet ground. All the time they were playing, the Queen never left off quarrelling with the other players and shouting off with his head or off with her head. By the end of the half an hour or so, all players except the King, the Queen, and Alice were in the custody of soldiers and under the sentence of execution. Then the Queen left off quite out of breath and walked away with Alice. Alice heard the King say in a low voice to the company generally, "You are all pardoned." Suddenly the cry, "The trial is beginning," was heard in the distance, and Alice ran along with the others. That is the end of chapter 8 of Alice in Wonderland. Chapter 9 of Alice in Wonderland. Who stole all the tarts? The Queen and the Queen of Horowitz were seated upon the throne when they arrived, and with a great crowd assembled about them. All sorts of little birds and bees. It was all a whole pack of cards, and they were standing before them in chains, with a soldier on each side to guard him. And near the King was the White Rabbit with a trumpet in one hand and a scroll parchment in the other. In the very middle of the court there was a table with a large dish of tarts upon it. "I wish they'd get this trial done," Alice thought, and hand around the refreshments. The judge, by the way, was the King, and he wore his crown over his great wig. "That's the jury box," thought Alice. "And those 12 creatures, some were animals and some were birds. I suppose they are jurors." Just then the rabbit cried out, "Silence in the court. Here I'll read the accusations." On this the White Rabbit blew 3 blasts on the trumpet, and then unrolled the parchment scroll and read as follows: "The Queen is hearts, she made some hearts, all on a summer's day. The knave of hearts, he stole the tarts, and took them quite away. Call the first witness," said the King, and the White Rabbit blew 3 blasts on the trumpet and called out, "First witness." The first witness was the Hatter. He came in with a teacup in one hand and a piece of bread and butter in the other. "You ought to have finished," said the King. When did you begin?" The Hatter looked at the March Hare, who had followed him into the court, arm in arm with Dormouse. "14th of March, I think it was," he said. "I give your evidence to the King. Don't be nervous, or I'll have you executed on the spot." This did not seem to encourage the witness at all. He kept shifting from one foot to the other, looking uneasily at the Queen, and in his confusion he took out a large piece of his teacup instead of the bread and butter. Just at this moment Alice felt a very curious sensation. She was beginning to grow larger again. The miserable Hatter dropped his teacup and bread and butter and went down on one knee. "I'm a poor man, your Majesty," he said. "You're a very poor speaker," said the King. "You may go," said the King, and the Hatter hurriedly left off the guard. "Call the next witness," said the King. The next witness was the Duchess's cook. She carried a pepper box in her hand. The people near the door began sneezing all at once. "Give your evidence," said the King. "Shan't," said the cook. The King looked anxiously at the White Rabbit, who said in a low voice, "The Majesty must examine this witness." "Oh, if I must, I must," said the King's head. "What are tarts made of? Pepper, mostly," said the cook. For some minutes the whole court was in confusion, and by the time they settled down, the cook had disappeared. "Never mind," said the King. "Call the next witness." Alice watched the White Rabbit as he fumbled over the list. Imagine her surprise when he read out at the top of his still voice the name, "Alice." That's the end of chapter 9 of Alice in Wonderland. Chapter 10 of Alice in Wonderland. Alice's evidence. "Here," cried Alice. She jumped up, and in such a hurry she tripped over the jury box, upsetting all the jurymen onto the heads of the crowd below. "Oh, I beg your pardon," she exclaimed in a tone of great dismay. The trial cannot proceed, said the king, until the jurymen are back in their proper places. All he repeated with great emphasis, looking hard at Alice. What do you know about this business? The king said to Alice. Nothing whatever, said Alice. The king then read from his book. Rule 42, all persons more than a mile high to leave the court. I am not a mile high, said Alice. Nearly 2 miles, Alice, said the queen. Well, I shan't go at any rate, said Alice. The king turned pale and shut his notebook hastily. Consider your verdict, he said to the jury in a low, trembling voice. There's more evidence. To come yet, please, your majesty, said the white rabbit, jumping up in a great hurry. The paper has just been picked up. It seems to be a letter written to the prisoner by the prisoner to somebody, to somebody. Handful of the paper as he spoke, and this is the letter, all is a serious set of verses. Please, your majesty, said the knave. I didn't write it, and they can't prove that I did. There's no name signed at the end. You must have meant some mischief, or else you'd have signed your name like an honest man, said the king. There was a general clapping of hands at this. Read them, he said. He had during to the white rabbit. There was dead silence in the court while the white rabbit read out the verses. That's the most important piece of evidence we've heard yet. I don't believe there's an atom of meaning in it, ventured Alice. There's no meaning in it, said the king. That saves a world of trouble, you know. We need to find any. Let the jury consider their verdict. No, no, said the queen. Sentence first, verdict afterwards. Stuff and nonsense, said Alice loudly. The idea of having a sentence first. Hold your tongue, said the queen, turning purple. I won't, said Alice. Off with her head. The queen shouted at the top of her voice. Nobody moved. Who cares for you, said Alice. She had grown up to her full size by this time. You're nothing but a pack of cards. At this, the whole pack rose up in the air and came flying down upon her, and she gave a little scream, half of fright and half of anger. Tried to beat him off, and found herself lying on the bank with her head in the lap of her sister, who was gently brushing away some dead leaves that had fluttered down from the trees upon her face. Wake up, Alice dear, said her sister. Why, what a long sleep you've had. Oh, I've had such a curious dream, said Alice, and she told her sister, as well as she could remember them, all these strange adventures of hers that you have just been reading about. Alice got up and ran off, thinking while she ran, as well as she might, what a wonderful dream it had been. And that is the end of Alice in Wonderland, read to you by me, Connor, other known as Grimbley, in 42 minutes exactly. Beat that, you losers on the internet. Haha, I'm the best reader. I'm a speed reading faster than you can even think, brother. Haha, get wrecked. Next up on the Grimbledy YouTube channel will be a review I have of Alice in Wonderland, so stay tuned for that. See you later. Bye bye.